If you're a buyer of real estate in South Carolina, we put together some of our very best negotiating tips so you can find free money in your deal and make it a win for you. So let's get after it. We are sitting here just having crested over half of the year finished in 2025. Want to run through some of the stats that we're looking at. Again, this is halfway through the year, including June stats as well. So here's what happened in June. The number of listings that took place that came to market in June were actually up 20% compared to June of 2024. That's a big increase, but the number of pendings were up 22% in June as well. So it ended up being a really busy finish to the first half of the year. Closings year over year are down just a little bit, about 6% from where we were halfway through 2024 to where we are in 2025. The days on market, Chris, that keeps creeping up a little bit. We're now at 65 average days on market for the properties that have closed. That doesn't count the ones that are still on the market, accumulating days on market. Sales price to list price ratio is kind of hanging out right at that 97.5%. Pretty solid, pretty steady. The monthly housing supply, which we always talk about each month, that keeps creeping up a little bit. It's now at 4.8 months supply of inventory. We know, again, balanced market, 3 to 6 months supply. So we're kind of inching towards that 5 month supply. And static inventory, it's kind of a big one, Chris. I know you track this one. It's up 29% year over year from where we were this time last year. So if you take a look at the snapshot of properties on the market halfway through the year, this year compared to last year, up 30%.
We got more choices.
Buyers got more choices, and we love buyers having choices. That's what we're talking about today is how do we help you be so successful in a real estate transaction negotiation to effectively find free money? So we're going to kind of go over maybe some of our best 5 or 6 tips of the way that we're seeing that. Chris, let's go after the first one, and let's educate folks. Transfer fees. And now I'm not talking about county transfer fees necessarily or town transfer fees, but I'm talking about community transfer fees, which didn't used to exist if you kind of go back as far back as you and I go back in the market, but they're much more prevalent. They're not just common to communities, but now they're happening even within villa complexes. So we're seeing these add-on costs, et cetera. Let's talk about what the expectation is for that and how buyers might be able to find some free money in that approach.
Well, there are transfer fees and let's just call condo regimes and things like that. They all differ. So what applies to one might not apply to the other, even if they're side-by-side developments.
Yes,
okay, so it's important, and they change all the time.
Yeah,
like all of a sudden they have a board meeting and they vote on it, and boom, there's a transfer fee now applicable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing to be considered of. The other thing to be considered of is coming off of the strong seller market we had, transfer fees were always just absorbed by the buyer. It's just a part of the thing. The seller didn't even think about it. It was
pause on that is that typically when boards get together, that's a community board or maybe a villa board, part of how they why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want to accumulate money to go towards capital reserves in future projects. Okay, so it's not just this tax that somebody takes the money and goes on vacation with. It's usable money for the benefit of the community. But they're oftentimes sold or voted on based on or predicated, hey, the concept is a buyer is going to pay it. Mr. and Mrs. Owner, you don't have to pay for it. A buyer's going to pay for it. What we're talking about is let's turn that around.
And it can flip. As we shift into a buyer market, the mentality of buyers might be, hey, with my offer, let me just go ahead and try and put that on the seller to pay for.
Sure.
Now, there's negotiations that are going to take place. So we don't know what the end result's going to be, but you're not going to get it if you don't ask for it.
Right. Is sometimes the auto modality of a buyer might be, oh, well, who's supposed to pay for that? And maybe an agent would say, oh, the buyer typically pays for that. Or maybe the listing agent says that. What we're suggesting is come work with us and figure out how to negotiate on your behalf, because at the end of the day, the community just wants their check. They don't really care where it comes from. And sometimes those checks are big, depending on the community. You said they vary. Sometimes they are tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So an opportunity to find some free money there. So a great one to start on there. The other is if you're financing and this is an interesting thing, and it's not that common, but it can be really strategic, is buying down the interest rate. A lot of folks have been waiting for interest rates to come back down to that 3%, 4%. It's just not going to happen. So how do you get your interest rate to come down and make your payments a little bit more affordable, maybe even just a more attractive? Well, if you spend 1 percentage point on the value of the loan, you talk about that with a lender, they'll typically call that a point. If you spend that money, you can typically buy down your interest rate by about 0.25% off the rate. And then you can just run the math. Well, how much would 0.25% savings be every single month over the course of your loan payment? That's a lot of money. And here's the trick. Who can pay for that? The lender doesn't care where that money comes from as long as it's under a cap. So why not go to your seller and say, hey guys, would you be willing to give me some kind of credit that I can utilize to pay down my interest rate? And it can be a very, very effective way. So let's also talk about seller credits, other ways that seller credits might come into play, for a buyer to ask a seller to give a certain credit on the transaction.
Well, there's actually a section in our contract of sale, our local contract of sale, I believe it's section 11, that allows the opportunity for a buyer to request seller credits. And 9 times out of 10, at least leading up to this, we see that as zero.
Right.
I mean, to me, if you're starting a negotiation with somebody, maybe there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity there that a lot of buyers, I think, overlook.
Sure.
And the neat thing about adding a seller provided credit under section, let's just call it section 11 under our contract of sale, is it allows you the opportunity of a higher offering price.
Sure.
The net effect to you as a buyer is going to be better, but the offering price, how often we work with sellers all the time. I mean, first thing we'll look at is what's the offer?
Sure.
What's the price?
Of course.
And so instead of offering less, maybe offer more, but then maybe try and back it down a little bit.
And so maybe you bring a little bit less cash to the table for closing. You can use that towards closing costs that hit your side of the settlement statement, et cetera. Really good negotiating tactic. Let's talk about other negotiating tactics. I know we already ran through the stats at the beginning of the video, 97.5% on average sales price to list price ratio. Let's talk about buyer offer strategies and why that's important to pay attention to in a sub-market.
We bring that up every time we do one of these videos. What's the sale price to list price ratio currently? But we're talking about a broad range of data, okay? These change market to market. One might be 97%. The average might be over here. It might be 95%. It might be 90%. It might be 100%.
Right. Yeah.
Knowing what market you're stepping into as a buyer helps you understand maybe what's a reasonable offer. Time and again, sometimes we hear buyers say, I don't want to offend a seller.
Right.
Or what does that mean? I don't want to offend a seller. Well, if the typical sale price to list price ratio is 95% and you offer 94%, I mean, you're not going to offend anybody.
Right.
But so understanding where that is in the marketplace, I think will help with that initial offer.
Using the data, the market data to your advantage. And it goes the other way, by the way. If you're really wanting to buy a property, it's a rare new listing that's come on the market, there's a lot of interest, et cetera. You got to be paying attention about going the other direction too. So another negotiating tactic, place to kind of find free value or money, sometimes might be in contents. I know we've had videos before, we talked about what's included in sale, what's not included in sale, but there could be an opportunity for you to pick up some extra items, right?
Sure.
You might pick up that pool furniture. You might pick up a barbecue grill. You might, the golf carts in the garage. That maybe the seller's not going to use that at their next property. Maybe you can offer to have that included. Right. What we're talking about is trying to finesse negotiability to a certain level where you said you don't want to offend a seller, but there might be opportunity to find some benefit there. So let's move on to another one. Let's talk about if someone's buying a rental property, like a short-term rental property. You've always made a good point about being strategic about that future money that might be achieved by the buyer. Let's talk about that relative.
It blows my mind how many people overlook this. You're buying an investment property. Let's say it's an ocean-oriented or an oceanfront.
Sure.
A week's rental income could be $10,000, $20,000.
Sure. Yeah.
Move the closing up a week. What does that do? That puts $10,000, $20,000 into your pocket.
Right.
It's an easy ask. Hey, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, would you like to close a week early?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. somebody's going
You
to
just made 20,000.
somebody's going to get that money, right? Or
Somebody's going to get it.
maybe even I mean, when you're talking about that amount of rental income, even during the course of a week, you're talking about a lot of money per day. Now, not every property applies, but even just inching it up a few days,
Exactly.
because we don't close on Saturdays, we don't close on Sundays, we got to close Monday through Friday. So somehow that rental income is going to get split. You might as well aim for the lion's share.
It could be $1,000 a day.
Yeah, right. And why not go for that and find some of that free money?
Again, it's an easy ask, and it's something that we tend to see sellers, they don't really resist because they're going to get the lump sum of the cash. They're going to get the sale done, and they move on to their next thing.
Yep. Okay. So let's switch gears one last time over to new products. Someone's interested in buying a new development product. And as inventory rises, those builders and developers, they want buyers. They want buyers. They want buyers. So they tend to get a little bit more lenient in their offerings. Let's talk about pursuing incentives on a new product.
Well, I think this is something that a lot of buyers don't understand is why would I just even engage a real estate agent to help me go buy a new house in a new development that they're breaking ground? I'll probably get my best deal if I go straight to that's really not the case. Once you walk in the door in the sales office, I mean, you're there. We're going to work out the deal, whatever it is.
Sure.
If you have representation, your agent can go in front of you and say, hey, what kind of incentives are you offering buyers right now to get them to move forward? And there's a laundry list sometimes.
And not only asking that, but going off of our experience of having seen on other deals what they've been willing to do, because we're in and out of those gates a lot. Ask for it so that we can say, guys, we've seen on a previous transaction, we were able to get the appliances upgraded or whatever this taken care of, et cetera. So it's about having that market knowledge and also having the competence and the confidence to kind of leverage that moving forward. So guys, listen, if you're in the market, there's ways to find free money. There's ways to enhance your transaction, and we want to help you find it. So give us a shout and we'll get after it with you.